Imagine sitting in a glittering ballroom filled with the city's richest and most powerful when suddenly a quiet single dad points to the sky and says, "That's my helicopter outside." The crowd falls silent and the CEO's wife goes pale as if she's seen a ghost. What secret could be so shocking that it changes everything in that moment? Stay with me till the end of this story because what you're about to hear will not only surprise you, it will move your heart. And before we begin, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the low hum of expensive laughter. Every corner soaked in wealth and arrogance as the city's most powerful gathered for the CEO's anniversary gala, a celebration that was less about love and more about showing off. Waiters in spotless uniforms floated across the polished marble floor carrying trays of champagne that sparkled under the lights. The orchestra played soft music in the background, but even their violins seemed drowned out by the chatter of billionaires boasting about their latest deals. And in the midst of it all, near the far corner, where no spotlight dared to shine, stood a man who looked so out of place he might as well have wandered in from another world. His suit was simple, not tailored like the rest, his shoes polished, but not Italian leather, his hair neatly combed, yet lacking the sleek gloss of wealth. He wasn't laughing, wasn't boasting. He was just there, silent, a protective hand resting on the small shoulder of a little girl who clutched his sleeve tightly. He was a single dad, an ordinary man who carried extraordinary weight in his heart. And yet, no one there knew his truth until that moment came when everything changed. He hadn't planned to attend this gala, but fate has a way of dragging even the quietest souls into storms meant to test them. The invitation had come unexpectedly, sent by a friend who believed he deserved more recognition for his silent brilliance for the company he had quietly built from scratch while raising his daughter alone after tragedy had ripped his family apart. But tonight wasn't about recognition. It was about revelation. The room suddenly hushed as the CEO himself, a man dripping with pride and power, entered with his dazzling wife on his arm. She was elegant, flawless, every step commanding attention in her shimmering gown, her smile hiding secrets only a few might have guessed. She walked with the confidence of someone who thought the world could never touch her. Yet her eyes betrayed something deeper when they briefly scanned the room and froze, not on the investors or politicians, but on the quiet single dad in the corner. For a fleeting second, her face faltered, her grip on her husband's arm tightening, but she quickly masked it with a smile no one else questioned. The night rolled on with speeches and toasts, with laughter that filled the gilded ceiling. But beneath it all, there was tension, an invisible string pulling the single dad and the CEO's wife closer across the distance. He hadn't wanted to cause a scene. He hated scenes. He had built his life around staying quiet unnoticed, just surviving for the sake of the little girl who was his entire world. But sometimes silence shatters on its own. The moment came when the CEO, in his arrogance, raised his glass and mocked those who didn't belong in circles of power, throwing thinly veiled insults at self-made men who didn't inherit wealth, but scraped their way up. The crowd laughed with him, but the single dad's daughter tugged his sleeve, her wide, innocent eyes, asking why they were laughing at people like her daddy. And that was when he lifted his chin, his voice calm yet unshakable, and pointed outside toward the open terrace, where the sound of blades cutting through the night began to hum louder and louder. "That's my helicopter outside," he said, each word slicing through the laughter like steel, and the room fell into a stunned silence. Every head turned, every glass froze midair, the sound of the helicopter's approach undeniable. But the loudest silence of all was from the CEO's wife, who went pale as the blood drained from her face, her hand trembling around the stem of her champagne glass. She looked at him as if she'd seen the past come alive, as if the life she thought she had buried had suddenly walked right into the ballroom to claim its truth. The CEO looked confused, angry, his pride stung by the audacity of a man he had dismissed as nothing more than an outsider. But his wife knew better. Her eyes filled with recognition, with fear, with something no one else could yet understand. The single dad held her gaze, not with arrogance, not with malice, but with a quiet strength that came from years of carrying burdens alone. He didn't need to boast. He didn't need to explain. His life, his struggle, his resilience had already spoken louder than their wealth ever could. The helicopter blades thundered closer, the glass windows trembling with their power, a sound that refused to be ignored, just like him. And in that suspended moment, everyone in the room felt it. The shift, the crack in the perfect facade of power. The CEO's wife's pale face was not just shock. It was history. It was truth catching up. And though no one yet knew what bound her to the single dad, the air itself promised that this was only the beginning of a storm that would shake their entire world. The helicopter's roar faded as it landed just beyond the terrace, its blades slowing, but its presence echoing inside the grand ballroom like a declaration of truth that no amount of money could silence. All eyes were now on the single dad, though he stood with the same quiet dignity he had walked in with. His daughter's small hands still in his, her innocent face unaware of the storm she and her father had just unleashed. The CEO, reed with embarrassment and anger, barked at security to escort this impostor out. But before anyone could move, his wife's trembling voice broke through the tension like a fragile glass cracking under pressure. "Stop," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet powerful enough to freeze every step, every breath in the room. The CEO turned to her, disbelief etched across his face, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Her gaze remained locked on the single dad, her pale face now carrying tears that no diamond necklace could hide. For years, she had lived with secrets, burying the pain of choices made in youth, pretending that wealth could erase the scars of love lost and promises broken. But here he was, the man she had once loved with a fire so fierce it had lit up her entire world before fate tore them apart. The man who had disappeared not because he wanted to, but because life had pushed him to the edge, forcing him to sacrifice his own heart to survive. And now he stood before her, not as the broken boy she remembered, but as a father, a fighter, a man whose strength could not be denied. The crowd began to murmur, whispers rippling like waves as they tried to piece together what their eyes and ears were telling them. The CEO grew more furious, demanding answers. But deep down, he saw it too, the way his wife looked at that man, not with disdain or fear, but with recognition, with a raw ache of memories that wealth could never buy back. The single dad finally spoke again, his voice steady, carrying the weight of truth. He told the room that he had built his life from nothing, raising his daughter with the only currency he ever truly had, love, sacrifice, and resilience. The helicopter outside wasn't a rented prop. It was the symbol of his company, a business he had built silently over the years, one that now stood toe-to-toe with the very empire the CEO had mocked others for never reaching. He had never needed their approval. But tonight, when his daughter asked why her daddy was laughed at, he could not stay silent. His truth had to be heard, not for him, but for her, so she would grow up knowing her father's worth was never measured in the shallow laughter of the powerful. The CEO's wife broke down then, unable to contain the storm in her chest any longer. She confessed to the room that long before the glittering empire, Long before the titles and the money, she had loved a man who gave her more than the world ever had. Genuine devotion, protection, and dreams of a future where love was enough. That man was standing before her now. She admitted that circumstances, manipulation, and pressure had torn them apart, that she had been told he had abandoned her, while in truth, he had been fighting battles no one cared to see. Her voice cracked as she revealed that the daughter clinging to his sleeve was not just his legacy, but a reminder of what he had lost and of what she had been forced to bury. The room gasped, the orchestra falling silent, waiters frozen with trays in midair. The CEO's pride shattered in front of everyone, his perfect life unraveling thread by thread. His wife's confession was not just words. It was betrayal in the eyes of his peers, a revelation that his empire could not protect him from. The single dad, however, did not speak to humiliate, nor to gloat. He simply said that life had taught him that power is not about how many people bow to you, but how many people you lift up with you. He had nothing to prove anymore. His presence was proof enough. And as his helicopter blades stilled outside as the city lights glittered against the glass walls, he reached down, lifted his daughter into his arms, and turned toward the exit. He had no intention of staying in that gilded cage of pretension because his world was bigger than chandeliers and champagne. But as he walked away, the CEO's wife stepped forward, tears streaming, her voice breaking as she begged him to stop, to not disappear again, to allow her to at least explain the scar of her silence. The room held its breath, torn between scandal and awe, between judgment and admiration. The single dad paused, his daughter's small arms wrapped around his neck, and for the first time since he had entered the ballroom, his eyes softened. He didn't speak a word, but his silence carried volumes. Sometimes forgiveness is not given in words but in the space to start again. And though the night ended in chaos, one truth remained unshakable. The single dad who pointed to the sky and said, "That's my helicopter," had not only claimed his rightful place in a world that mocked him, he had reminded everyone that true power comes from love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand tall even when the world tries to tear you down. And to everyone listening right now, if this story touched your heart, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel because more stories like this are waiting to change the way you see the